Webinars are hot. As a content marketing professional, I've produced hundreds of videos for social and traditional media platforms and currently work with one of the largest podcast networks in the country. So for me, understanding how webinars work in the B2B space is both essential to my professional development and an exciting form of content creation. According to a study commissioned by digital agency Demandwave, 41% of B2B marketers cite webinars as the best marketing tactic for driving revenue. I've set out to discuss webinars with one of the foremost experts in the field, Matt Lay, president of the Streaming Network in Toronto. Together, we've created this multi-part series of videos and podcasts, the webinar Lessons from the Front Line, or How I Learned to Live with Never Getting a Second Chance with Live Virtual Events. Hello, welcome to LFTF, Lessons from the Front Line. With me as usual is Matthew Lay, president of the Streaming Network. As you can see today, we are here in beautiful Mexico, enjoying a lovely pixelated
view of the beach.
Nothing, which sort of, because we're talking about such digital subjects
Yes.
as personalization, I think a pixelated view is somehow appropriate.
Right.
We're going to talk a little bit about personalization, or a lot about
Yeah.
personalization. Google and Facebook, along with so many other businesses, are really into personalization. This is like front and center in terms of engaging their audiences. But there's also a way to apply this when you're creating a webinar. And so we want to dig a little bit into that and talk about how you can take your webinar program and create a layer personalization onto it.
Right.
So let's start. Why don't we just start talking a little bit about why are people talking about personalization? What's going on right now in the world today that this is kind of become a interesting and worthwhile subject?
Well, I think there's a couple of different things, right? Is that I think it's a bit of a backlash, right? Is that we all, we still talk about the importance of our automation programs because they are important, and there's automation involved in personalization too. But things got a little too automated, right? And we've all been stuck in an automation that we didn't want to be a part of, and we forgot to opt out of, or whatever it might be. We've all delivered automations that have not been very good and whatnot. So there's an automation, marketing automation that is part of what got us here and is very important, but it lacks the personal aspect. So, and we're seeing it across the digital spectrum, whether it be the need to have tickets responded to by humans, not by autoresponders, to, in this case, trying to get more human in your engagement and more personal in your engagement. But on the flip side, you referenced two big companies, huge companies, who've been collecting scary amounts of data on us for the last 10 years. And as a result of having all of this data, Google, Facebook are able to put a lot of ads and a lot of information in front of us that is very unique to us. Now when you and me search the web, or when we're on the web, it's a completely different experience from one another. And that's because of the way they've personalized our overall experience.
Right.
And so the world of B2B is they've been doing it for a while. We called it persona-based marketing, where we were creating and curating content for different personas. And with the advent of account-based marketing, which is a massive trend, and in B2B, especially if you're in an enterprise sale, it's more effective, important, and more money is going into it than any inbound strategy whatsoever. Is that account-based marketing is all about that personalization approach. So it's I would probably say the thing we hear the most out there is about it, and it's also that thing that I call it 3 or 4 years ago when we would ask about someone's social strategy and they would smile and say we've kind of got one, or we're working on one. A lot of people know this is something that they should be doing, personalization of content.
Right.
But they're not quite there yet.
Right, they haven't quite defined exactly what it means,
Right.
and when you're personalizing, and in this case, and clearly even when Google and Facebook does it, they're just taking content that's already been created and reams of the content that's already been created, and then filtering it to people that are going to be engaged in that content.
Right.
Or they're not creating, but they're taking content that's created.
All they're doing is they're looking at who you are
Yeah.
and people that look like you. And actually, they're not even doing it in many cases with ads. All they're doing is providing that data to people like us who advertise, and we decide we want to be in front of Pete Vamos, right? But all they're doing is they're displaying the content they think they're either displaying the content they want you to see, or they're displaying the content that they think you should be seeing, right? And that's what, that's one aspect of personalization.
Right.
So on the last podcast, we talked about the repurposing of content, right? And we talked about different buyers and how they consume content. And if we knew exactly who it was that was coming to our website, how old they were, what their level, what their job was, or what their level was within an organization, and all that, and we could only give them the content that we thought that they would like to consume, then things would be really awesome for us. We don't have that ability or that capacity, but that's part of it, is getting the right content in front of the right people. That's one aspect of personalization.
Right.
Another aspect of personalization that comes along with this is based around people's known interests. So we know certain people have certain interests that are different from others based around how they've interacted with our past content, the webinars that they've attended, the what they've read on our website. What we can track, we kind of know, and as a result, we can start suggesting certain pieces of content to them.
Right.
And usually when we're suggesting stuff that we think they'll like what YouTube does when you play a video, but often we're suggesting to them something that will help move them to the next stage.
Right.
You've watched this 5-minute video on webinar ROI. Now watch this webinar on the subject. It's 45 minutes and it's going to give you everything you need to know. Once you go through that, and if you watch the whole thing, I'm pretty sure you're ready for the next stage, which is engagement with one of my sales reps.
Right. So now, as we enter into breaking this down in terms of the world of webinars, is personalization, like, where does it fit into, even if we're talking about the funnel, is personalization something you do further down, or is it kind of all over the place? Like, how does personalization work within webinars?
Well, there is a webinar strategy, I think, clearly, because I live webinars, that can be applied to every stage of the buyer's journey. And we had a podcast that planned for that in the future. But so the more personal you can get at all stages, the better you're going to do. So what that might look like is, like most companies, we service a diverse group of companies. So we have a financial services practice, which everyone who's listened to this podcast has heard about. We service the legal industry and the accounting industry. They're very similar in how they utilize the tool. Technology, life sciences, or pharmaceuticals. And each of them live and operate in a slightly different world, and webinars have a slightly different value proposition. But when you get down to why they should use ours and not the other guys, a lot of times they relate back to the same core values of the data, the engagement, how we benchmark the users, and how we integrate into existing systems, and how we can help them pull the gold out of who's been through their program. So, but because they all have different terminology, because they all, one calls them a client, one calls them a customer, one calls them a prospect, one calls them whatever that might be, is that by creating content that is specific to, is personalized to that that vertical, you have a better chance of attracting that lead at the front end. And anyone who's ever done verticalization of collateral knows that it's a lot of the same stuff with a couple different logos and a few different words, sort of mixed in. So at the top line, that's where it is. But you brought up a point that was very, very important, is that many people out there have a webinar program that looks like this. We have a calendar, and we are going to do these webinars, and we are going to invite our list to said webinar. But that's not what the larger, more evolved organizations are doing. So when you look at someone like Microsoft, who 2 years ago were doing, or 3 years ago maybe, I'm not sure when this case study started being tracked, was doing about 200 webinars a year, is now doing 4,000 to 5,000 webinars a year, or live webinars a year. Now, they're not producing 5,000 webinars a year, we've been talking about this for years, is what they're doing is based on the data that they know about their pipeline and where people are, is they are not sending out anything to their entire list, is they are promoting the right webinar at the right time. Marketers have known this for a long time, and those who have integrated their tool and have drawn straight lines between webinar data and revenue or pipeline know this even better, is that if someone goes through a webinar, they're ready to take the next step. That next step may be a purchase or a talk with a salesperson. It may not. It may be a demo. It all depends on where they are at the point in time. So if you're looking at your pipeline and you see that you've got this many people in consideration on this product, then you want to be promoting certain webinars to them. And this idea around simulated live, the ability to take webinar content, promote it to a group of people and have them interact with it is something that's being done at the large organizations a lot, so that they're personalizing that person's buyer's journey, if you will, and trying to get that in front of them. They're also trying to get other things in front of them at that time, right? White papers, ebooks, like the different things are coming at them at that time. The webinar is just one, because they know if the person gets through that, they're more likely to become a purchaser, they're more likely to take the next step, right? So they're personalizing when you hear what message, rather than trying to do one message for everyone.
So these are webinars that were created previously.
Yep.
You know that there's a group over here that's interested in that, and you simulate it as if
Yeah.
it's a live event.
Yeah.
Go through the entire process as if it was like the first time you did it.
Right.
And you just keep doing this, and each new group, you're personalizing this content to them because you know that this is the sort of thing that they want, but you're actually never creating, or in these instances, you don't even necessarily have to create new content. You're putting old content out there as if it's new.
Right,
Yeah.
and it's a little bit, I just want to make sure that we're on the same page with the wording here. It's a little bit what they want, and it's a little bit what you want them to see.
Yeah.
Right? So the person is in a consideration stage of the journey. You're going to want them to consume certain content that you know gets them past that point, right, with you. And so you want to put the content in front of them that makes sense to you. Not just the stuff that they like or they do enjoy.
You're still trying to sell something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And because the webinar is such a key indicator of readiness to take action, that's where the people like the Microsofts or those who have these really evolved programs is why they're doubling down, and they've got 4,000 running in the course of the year, is that they are everywhere, even into post-sale. They've got these running to the right people, smaller audience sizes, because they feel they have a greater impact. And the simple fact that you decide not to participate in that webinar, live or on demand or check out, tells them something too. You're not ready to take that next step. Something's going on, right? So
that's really interesting. So that's great. Those numbers from Microsoft are phenomenal. That's an unbelievable growth in terms of their overall webinar. Let's talk a little bit about on demand.
Right.
Like, how does that fit into all this?
Very similar to how it fits with the live, right? So on demand, every data point for on demand is growing rapidly. The number, people often, even today, I was having a conversation with a gentleman who was in here, and we were doing a webinar this morning, and he was like, yeah, but I mean, on demand, that's like, that thing you TiVo that you mean to watch that you're never going to watch. Okay, there's a lot of people who don't. There's a lot of people who still register and never show up to a webinar at all, which is why we suggest running webinars over and over again live, because there's a psychological advantage to it. But every part of the on-demand data set is rising. How long people view, number of total audience members who participate in on-demand. Every year we're seeing this number go up. We're well over 30 minutes for on-demand now on webinars. And I think that has to do with our on-demand culture. Netflix, all of our content, we want it when we want it, and we're used to doing it that way, so we will actually go seek out and consume it that way. And probably has a little bit to do with how well some really smart marketers are at customizing our experiences. So one thing that in the ABM space, there's a lot of tools out there that will create what are called content experiences. And that content experience, beyond being tailored to, say, financial services or technology, it will be tailored towards your company. You will be sent, you'll enter into an automation, or be sent an email, or click on something, and all of a sudden your company's logo is up there beside the person who's marketing to you. Right. And the content choices that are in there are based around the stuff that has had interest, or more importantly, the data on what you are looking at as an organization. So embedded within those content experiences are webinars, because the same thing about watching that live is that if they're going to spend 30 minutes on average, or over 30 minutes now on average with a piece of content, that is a vested individual. That is someone who's really taking a good look at you in an organization. And if you are going, and usually again, this is enterprise stuff, right, when you're doing this, but if you're going to be targeting this company and you want to move them into that, that next step, that's a person that needs to be, talked to or spoken to or whatever it might be. So webinars are a big part of most people's ABM strategies, and their call it their persona-based marketing initiatives that they have out there.
And there's no risk in terms of like recycling and repurposing content, because each one of these groups, you know who they are. No one else is going to. So you can kind of ad nauseum repurpose stuff as long as you're targeting, right?
I mean, yeah. And I mean, even if you're not, you know what I mean? Like, when you started this journey with me, I don't know when our last webinar, our first podcast was. Do you remember how long ago that was? Was that like almost a year now?
Yeah, almost a year.
There's stuff I said that day that you didn't understand, right? You were just getting into this. You actually like Googled stuff on webinars before talking to me the first time, right?
Yeah.
And so
don't kid yourself. I still don't understand.
Yeah, well, you're doing a lot better.
Thank you. I've learned how to fake it.
I heard you talking about that person. You're like, yeah, and this and that and the other. I was very proud of you when you told me about that.
No, I have a much clearer understanding of this whole thing. Yeah.
But there are aspects from that first one. I'm sure if you went back and actually, listened to it without being able to critique, the performance of us or whatever at the time, that you would be like, I see, I get that now, right? And so, I mean, some people are like, oh, you got to refresh that. We have a financial services webinar that was shot in 2015, and it does look dated. Looks dated. Our set's dated. Our colors are dated. It looks dated. But the content is spot on. So if you're out there and you're looking to start a financial services webinar program, like you're starting from scratch and you want to know what other people do and how to build something to move into that thing, this is the blueprint.
It still works.
It still works. Yeah. Nothing has changed. Why should I take it down? And if someone didn't watch it when they were at, a place that had an existing webinar program, they go somewhere else, they're asked to start it, and they're like, oh crap, I didn't start it last time. I need to know how to start it. They go there, they'll learn how to do it. It's a good piece of content for the right person at the right time.
Right. A lot of the stuff we've been talking about here is been focused on larger enterprise size organizations, but a lot of our clients are smaller operators. Is this stuff that you're talking about, is this only work for bigger companies, or does this also apply to smaller operators?
I think trends are trends, right? And there's a reason why everyone is talking about personalization, and if you're small or large, you should be doing it. Let's just be honest. If you don't have the right technology stack, it's going to be hard to do. And so for smaller companies, it's going to be more challenging. There are a lot of technologies out there that help do it, that make it really smart and intelligent and enable the entire process. But personalization is something that everyone should be doing for the same reason that webinars work for everyone, right? So we throw out the HubSpots, the Hootsuite, the Microsoft stories, because these stories are so, like the numbers that are tossed around, a viewership, pipeline, number of webinars, change in position. I mean, it was Microsoft. They were only doing 200, now they're doing 4,000 a couple years after working with the platform. But everything that holds true for them generally holds true for everybody else. The question is, how can you do it? So, I like to juxtaposition, two deals we were working on at the exact same time, that closed at the exact same time. And, before I jumped on a plane to go out to Vancouver to speak with Hootsuite, who gets, on certain webinars, they get 10,000 registrants, and they get thousands of viewers, and they require a way of segmenting the best viewers, and their sales team does not want to follow up with everyone because they know there's a lot of people there that are just there to learn and are not buyers. So they had to find a way of skimming off the top of the webinar viewership the people who were most ready to buy. And in doing so, they had to utilize a lot of the engagement metrics that we talk about over and over and over again. Well, at the same time, we had someone sitting in the studio who I came down to shake hands with because, it was a company called Tucker Professional Corporation. And Tucker Professional Corporation is an accounting firm. And I use, the term firm because that's what they are, but it's one accountant with some people that do, that are, maybe they're CGAs, maybe they're pre-CAs, but it's one guy, basically. It's
Tucker.
Tucker, it's his professional corporation, and he's got a business where he does the books for doctors or medical practitioners. And he was in here doing the studio gig, and he was doing the webinar program, and it was interesting because it was a much smaller than a Hootsuite, right? It's one guy.
And unexpected. I mean, you don't get a lot of one-person shops doing these sorts of things, right? That's quite unexpected.
So what happened is that for him, it was, he had been doing webinars just like Hootsuite for a couple years. He had been doing the same webinar, right? It's a webinar he does for medical grads who I found out on that day go from making, $60,000 a year to making $280,000 a year. They're in tremendous amounts of debt, and the CRA makes it not that easy for them to get all their tax credits while they're in school and losing money at an alarming rate and racking up that debt. And so what he does is he just says, look, here's all the things you need to be doing, and if you want to send your stuff in, I'll do it for you for free. And the idea is that he does it for free, and then when they become a doctor and they're making that money, they become a customer, right? Client. Yeah. So he would do webinars in the past, but he would do like a follow-up, but he didn't know anything about anyone. He didn't know what it was, and he basically knew he was getting clients out of it, but had no way of prioritizing who he followed up with because he's got billable hours. He's not a salesperson. He's not going to beg for business, right? So he'd do a follow-up email and see what happened. He always got a couple customers, so he always did it. Mm-hmm. So he goes from doing that on what I think was even a free service or something like that he was using to coming in here with all of this and hosts and whatever, because he figures he can use it every year for a while until the laws drastically change. And with the same data that enabled Hootsuite, enabled him to be able to know who to follow up with. So in his case, he's utilizing this asset on demand, which is he's got a highly focused business, but highly focused and personalized to somebody who is not yet graduated from med school, who's racking up debt and offering to do their books for them. This is a tool that we asked him the other day why he hasn't been back, and he's like, well, I keep using it.
Because it keeps working.
It keeps working. Like there's not a need right now for him and his business to even create another piece of content, right? So, I mean, I'm not going to say I think he has a personalized business, so that makes sense, but it does speak to the fact that it works for everyone, right? Mm-hmm. Large or small. Well, let's look at us, right? We're about a $10 million business, but we're servicing very, very, very large customers. And we have a very, very different message for that financial services, that law firm, that tech company. We have even different services, right? The law firms do a lot of our professional services where the tech companies don't even touch them, right? They do it all themselves. And so talking about our studio and talking about this and talking about that, they don't even think we're a webinar company. They think we're something completely different.
Right.
So in the old days where we had the one website, one experience, one this, one that, we'd have to hope they drove them to the right spot and they were looking for the right thing. So we started implementing, the base minimum of personalization, which is this idea around the persona of who the person is and what the organization looks like, and a little bit of ABM strategy so that we can get all the great content that we're doing, but the right content in front of people.
Right.
So we're utilizing a tool, it's called Target, and it allows us to create these content experiences that we're putting out and tracking how different companies are interacting with us. And I think it's going to be a big way that we go. And part of the impetus for us in investing in it is that we are dealing with those large organizations where there's multiple buyers and it makes sense. So I think that it's important for everyone to get as personal as possible with their marketing. It's important to know that we all know that different buyers in different verticals and different buyers at different levels look at different things. Mm-hmm. Watch our repurposing or listen to our repurposing podcast on ideas of how to do it once and have it work for everyone. But yeah, I don't think that this is limited to the enterprise by any stretch of the imagination.
Great, great. So we, at the beginning of this podcast, just before we went on air, I said to Matt, I think we're going to get through this entire thing in 20 minutes. We've made it through 2 questions. So I'm going to call it now.
Okay.
I'm going to say thank you very much to those in the audience that are watching. I'm going to say thank you to Matt.
Yeah.
We're going to do part 2 of this, and it'll be a really great 1-2 punch. We're going to dig a little bit deeper into personalization, how it actually works, and some examples of you know, we'll ask some big questions, we'll ask some small questions. So until then, that's the world of webinars as we see it. Matthew Lay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Pete.
We'll see you again.